This is Andrea Askowitz of Writing Class Radio. Our submission period is now open. Send us your best personal story, 1,200 to 1,500 words on any topic. Please check our submission guidelines at writingclassradio.com. We pay. I'm Andrea Askowitz.
And I'm Allison Langer. This is Writing Class Radio. You'll hear true personal stories and learn a little bit about how to write your own stories. Together, we produce this podcast, which is equal parts heart and art. By heart, we mean the truth in a story. By art, we mean the craft of writing. No matter what's going on in our lives, writing class is where we tell the truth. It's where we work out our shit. There's no place in the world like writing class, and we want to bring you in.
This episode is about using a character to express the voice of reason. Okay, so often in a story, the narrator is in a bind and can't see clearly. In this story, in the one we bring you today, the narrator's wife says something. And when she says that thing, the narrator opens his mind to a different point of view. Today's story is by listener Nicholas Garnett. Nick is an adjunct professor of creative writing at Florida International University and Miami Book Fair International. He's also the editor of the journal Sliver of Stone. His writing has appeared in Salon.com, the Florida Book Review, and other places like Best Sex Writing of 2013. Most importantly, Nick is the co-producer of Lip Service, which is a Knight Foundation award-winning live storytelling show in Miami. I produced Lip Service for 9 years, and Nick was my co-producer for a few of those years. He's such a nice guy and a great writer and editor. So nice that I married him.
Ha ha ha.
You
married him, like you performed his wedding.
All right, you already know that. Yeah, okay.
Ha ha. All right, let's get to Nick's story. Here's Nick Garnett.
In the summer of 1982, when I was 24 years old, my mother returned home from a summer vacation to Greece. She asked me to come over to her place. There was something important she needed to tell me. When I got there, she showed me a snapshot she'd taken while she was in Athens. It was a close-up of a smiling, bearded man in his 50s. He looked like me around the eyes. She said, "His name is Elias, and he's your father." Until then, when it came to the identity of my biological father, my mother and I had our own version of don't ask, don't tell. I'd always assumed my mother's first husband, whom she divorced just before I was born, was my biological father. As far as I was concerned, just getting somebody pregnant didn't make you a father any more than liking to eat made you a chef. My mother married my stepfather when I was 4. Even though they had divorced when I was 12, my stepfather was the only father I could remember, and all the father I needed. My mother said, "It happened the summer of 1957. I met him on vacation in Greece, and that's the last time I saw him." I asked her, "Did he know about me?" She shook her head. "Not a thing." I asked my mother how she found him. She had learned that Elias owned a chain of clothing stores in Athens. One afternoon, she walked through the door of one of his shops. There he was, standing behind the counter. Over coffee, they caught up on the previous 25 years. Elias told my mother he was married and had a daughter. My mother handed him a picture of me. She said, "You've got a son, too." She told me he seemed more flustered than shocked. My mother handed me a plastic bag containing a few polo-style shirts. She said, "He wanted you to have these." I sat there with a snapshot in one hand and a bag of shirts in the other. I said, "Why did you do this now?" She said, "We're not getting any younger. What if something happened to him?" I said, "So now what?" She said, "That's up to the two of you." I told myself that the news didn't really matter. I already had a dad, and I'd gotten this far in my life without Elias. Now that he knew about me, I'd let him make the first move. But as the months dragged on, I didn't receive a phone call or a letter. It began to matter. How could somebody find out they had a son and not reach out? The shirts he'd sent me came apart at the seams after a couple of wears. I took that as a sign. I thought about having the picture my mother gave me of Elias printed on the back of the shirts, along with the caption, "This guy knocked up my mother, and all I got out of it was this crappy shirt." And for the first time, I resented my mother, too. Not for keeping the secret all these years, but for having revealed it. Before, the story of my life had felt complete. All of a sudden, it felt as though it was missing a main character. 2 years later, I went to Greece on my own summer vacation. I had a plan. In my wallet, I carried a slip of paper my mother gave me with Elias's phone number and the address of his shop. I would show up the next day at his store the way my mother had. But then, the next day would come, and I would find a reason not to do it. Finally, I ran out of vacation and excuses. The truth was, I was scared. How might his wife and family react when they learned I existed? What if he hadn't contacted me because he didn't want anything to do with me? What would it feel like to be rejected like that? When I returned home, I called my mother. She asked me, "What happened?" "Nothing," I said. There was silence on the line. Finally, she said, "And you're okay with that?" I thought for a second. "Yeah," I said. And for the next 25 years, I was okay. Elias faded away to an abstraction, a minor character in the story of my life who had long ago become irrelevant. And then, just after my mother was diagnosed with cancer, she sent me a letter. In it, she told me everything about that summer of 1957. How she had been in Greece visiting friends and relatives and escaping an unhappy marriage. How handsome and romantic Elias had been. How he had taken her to the archaeological sites by day and the tavernas by night. How he danced on the tables and played the guitar and sang love songs to her. When that summer was over and my mother returned home, the romance had ended, and so had her marriage. 9 months later, I began. She had often wondered how her life, our lives, might have turned out had she ended up with Elias. She ended the letter by saying, "I have my regrets, but there are 2 things I've never regretted for 1 second. The summer of 1957 and you." A few months later, my mother was gone. And, for all I knew, so was Elias. Just as my mother wondered how Elias might have changed the course of her life, I began to wonder how mine might have changed had I been brave enough to walk through the door of Elias's shop 25 years earlier. Soon after I began dating my wife, Denise, I told her the story about my mother and Elias. I expected her to react as other women had when I told them, all misty-eyed and dreamy as if I was recounting the plot of a romantic novel. Instead, Denise, who grew up in the projects in the Bronx and is 1,000 times braver and tougher than I'll ever be, asked me, "So, do you have a love child out there somewhere?" I was indignant. No, I didn't have a love child, and if I did, I sure as hell wouldn't pretend he didn't exist the way Elias had. But then I started thinking. I was about the same age that Elias was when he found out about me. What would I do if some ex-girlfriend showed up at my job with a picture of a young man she said was my son? Would I reach out to him? Or would I fear that he might resent me? That he might reject me? Maybe I was more like Elias than I wanted to admit. This year, Denise and I are planning a trip to Greece. I want to find Elias, but not because I need him to fill in a part of me that's missing. These days, the story of my life feels fully cast. I'm not looking for a father. I'm looking for a chance to sit down with an old man who looks like me around the eyes and talk about the one thing we have in common. A beautiful woman he met during that beautiful summer of 1957. A summer spent at the archaeological sites by day and the tavernas by night, dancing on tables and singing love songs to a woman who would never forget or regret 1 minute of it. Or him. Or me.
I put on cologne today to meet a new friend, to make a good impression. You called as I was on my way.
We'll be back to talk about Nick's story after the break. For anyone interested in improving your writing, First Draft, Weekly's writers group, is for you. It's Tuesdays, 12 to 1 Eastern time. It's a community. We come together to write for 30 minutes, share what we wrote, get feedback, and leave inspired.
First session, always free.
Otherwise, $35 a month. That gives you 8 full sessions a month. If you are interested in joining First Draft, jump on Patreon/Writing Class Radio.
A famous writer called Alison Langer once said, "You'll never know how great your writing is unless you share it at First Draft."
I love when you quote me. We're back. This is Alison Langer, and you're listening to Writing Class Radio. You just heard a story by listener Nick Garnett, where in one conversation with his wife, his entire perspective changed.
I love Denise in this story. You know, it's like so often the people that are close to us agree with everything we say or feel. And, you know, like in life, that's kind of nice, but it also could be kind of problematic. But in this case, instead of agreeing with Nick, like Denise wasn't like, "Oh, baby, that's so sad." She was like, "Hold on a second. Do you have a love child?" And then Nick was like, "What? Wait a second. If I found out that I had a kid right now at this age," and in this point in the story, I think Nick was like he said that he was the same age that his bio dad was when he found out that he had a bio dad. But so Nick was like, would I reach out to a kid if I found out right now that I had a kid? Probably not.
It's tough. You know, it got me thinking too. But the point of the story, and what I love so much is that we see the narrator change. Like in the beginning, he's blaming, you know, he's sad this, he's sad that. He kind of goes there, he doesn't follow through. And it's hard to understand because we're not in his situation. But when asked that one question, what would you do? It's really hard to know. I mean, you uproot your whole life. Are people willing to do that? It's the unknown. And I thought it was that part was really, really amazing. And that made the story for me, actually.
I know, because he was, you were mad at him. You were like, knock on the door, go to the store. And we didn't, so like we were like, I don't know, not rooting for him, but rooting for him to do something else.
Yeah, well, I think it's hard because, you know, to be rejected by your dad, like a biological parent, the thought of that is probably paralyzing. I don't know because that's not happened to me. So the point of this whole thing, the point of storytelling is to really listen to what is going on in somebody else's world and try to understand, not to say, even to compare yourself to them. In the end, the point is just to try to understand what somebody else was going through instead of judging. And I was pretty judgmental. I was like, what the fuck is wrong? Like, just knock on the damn door. What's going on here? You can't leave without finding out. But, you know, I don't know what I would have done. But let's talk about the writing for a second. I mean, we're talking about the voice of reason in this episode. So that is why we're really picking the story itself apart. We don't usually do so much of that.
But it is part of the writing in this case because
Nick used another character. I mean, it is what happened in life, but he didn't need to bring her. Well, he needed to bring her in this case, but he didn't have to. Nick could have just been like, and then I got this, and then my thought changed. Of course, he artfully showed us how that thought changed. But I wanted to say this for a second about why I love the story, because it shows how stuck in our own heads we can be. Like how we can live for years and years and years with something, thinking something is true for so long that might not be true. And that's what this story revealed. It's well done. It was in that moment that Nick understood his biological dad. And then in that moment, Nick took responsibility for his own actions. Like instead of blaming his dad for rejecting him the whole time, he was like, wait, I would have done the same thing. And so he learned something in that moment that he was probably like his dad. So we talk about this all the time in writing class. Like people love to rant and rage against a person who's hurt them. And in a way, that's what Nick did throughout the story until he's like, what? I played a role in this too. And that's what I love so much about stories about personal psychology. It's like turning the camera around and looking directly at the self. And Nick did that. Okay, so I do think that using Denise as that character is part of the writing. Like he brought her in to show that moment of change. It wasn't like he was just lying in bed and then thought, wait, maybe I'm like my dad, my bio dad too. So that was part of it. Even though we are commenting on his life, we're also commenting on his writing.
I also think he did a really great job of grounding us. I mean, it's really hard to tell a story over the span of such a long period of time. And he brought us back in, was pretty good about telling us how old he was at each phase of this story, don't you think?
Yeah, I do. It spans an awful lot of time, and it is hard to tell a story that goes from like 25-year-old kid Nick as 25-year-old to Nick at 50 to Nick. I mean, I think it even moved forward till now. We don't know how old he is now, but it spans many years. Another reason why I really thought this story was beautiful. This story gives me chills. I originally heard this story out loud at lip service. And when I heard it, I was like, I want to bring this onto the show.
Yay, I'm so glad you did. Thank you, Nick, for sharing your story. And thank you all for listening. Writing Class Radio is produced by Virginia Laura, Andrea Askwitz, and me, Allison Langer. Social media content is by Ariel Henley and Mia Pennycamp. Theme music by Emia. Additional music by Ari Herstand and Poddington Bear. There's more writing class on our website, writingclassradio.com, including video classes, stories to study, and editing resources. If you love this show and enjoy all the extras on our website, hit the Support Us button. And check out the writing classes and publishing insight we are giving our Patreon supporters. $10 a month gets you an all-access pass to Andrea's publishing conversations, discussions, questions, everything.
The best thing that we have to offer is for $25, you can take a class a week with Allison. The class is 12 to 1 Eastern via Zoom. It's community, it's connection, it's writing.
Yeah, it's fun. We just write to a prompt for 30 minutes and then at least 3 people get to share what they wrote and get some feedback. It is really fun. It's a great group. Right now there's about 25 people, so it's awesome. Okay, a new episode will drop the first Wednesday of the month, so look for us. There's no better way to understand ourselves and each other than by writing and sharing our stories. Everyone has a story. What's yours?
Hold on a second. Vicky's vacuuming. Hold on. Honey, will you hold on a second? I'm recording. Vicky! Vicky! Honey, stop. I'm recording. Sorry.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, my God. Yeah, she went crazy. Okay.
Hey there, this is Todd Arkell, host of The Mental Approach. Thank you for taking the time to listen to The Mental Approach. I created this series for parents and their athletes because everyone is training their physical skills, but so few of you are training your mind. And I've assembled a cross-section of athletes and coaches as guests to provide you with inspirational stories, practical advice, and some encouragement to gain the edge you need both on and off the field of play. This show is available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, and of course at thementalapproach.com.